Okay, let's jump right into a wildly unconventional thought experiment today. We're looking at a pretty radical text from April 2021 by an author named Xu Feng. It essentially asks us to zoom way out and completely rethink how we manage to live together on a shared planet. The goal? Engineering an absolute end to human conflict. It presents this massive what-if scenario that systematically tries to dismantle the very friction that causes human beings to argue, fight, and ultimately go to war. So, here is the core question driving this entire essay. Can we actually systematically engineer an end to human conflict? Xu Feng challenges us to imagine a world where we completely dismantle all that societal friction. It's a grand, sweeping question for sure, and it's paired with an even grander proposed solution that we're going to break down step by step in this explainer. To set up this massive solution for humanity, Xu Feng actually starts with a really relatable, everyday analogy. He calls it the animal farm dilemma. Imagine you've got a single enclosed circular space, and inside this shared area you have this chaotic mix of cows, horses, donkeys, sheep, pigs, dogs, chickens, ducks, and geese. They are all literally forced to share the exact same environment, even though they have completely different habits, completely different physical traits, and wildly different food preferences.
Now, Xu Feng uses a bit of mild humor here to point out the inevitable chaos of this setup. On one side, you have the chickens, ducks, and geese, right? And they're constantly complaining because the larger animals, the sheep, pigs, and dogs, just keep trampling all over their eggs. But then on the flip side, the cows, horses, and donkeys are furious because the birds are defecating in their feeding troughs, and the smaller animals are constantly stealing their food. And the one universal, shared grievance across the whole farm? All the animals blame each other for excessive, absolutely unbearable flatulence. Basically, this forced shared environment practically guarantees misery for everyone involved.
So what's the actual fix for these animals? Well, Xu Feng lays out a very specific, logical progression. Step 1, you have to recognize that moral education is totally futile here. I mean, you can't teach a cow to stop acting like a cow or somehow convince a chicken to respect a pig's personal boundaries, right? Because these clashes are based on pure physical nature and habit, step 2 becomes the only effective approach. You have to provide each animal with its own distinct enclosed space that corresponds only to its species. And then step 3 is just the inevitable result of that. Absolute separation successfully avoids all mutual complaints and torment. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is how this translates directly to human society. Xu Feng argues that the human species actually shares striking similarities to those livestock. Our inherent preferences clash just as violently. And this brings us to the author's core concept: One Earth, 64 systems. He defines this as a transitional mode of life where 64 entirely different, completely isolated ways of living exist simultaneously on Earth. The text positions this as a necessary stepping stone toward an ultimate ideal, which the author refers to as Xu Feng-style communism. By essentially separating the globe into these isolated systems, the ultimate goal is to systematically eliminate all human contradictions. You're probably wondering, why exactly that number? Like, why not 50 or a nice even 100? Well, the text briefly but firmly establishes that the number is exactly 64. Because, according to the author's theory, human survival requires precisely 64 elements, and not a single one of those elements can be safely omitted. Okay, so how do we actually pull this off? How do you divide the entire global population into these 64 systems? The whole strategy revolves around sorting humanity based on their deepest, most unchangeable preferences. Instead of forcing everyone into one massive, messy global society, people would actively self-segregate into isolated spheres built entirely around what they inherently prefer to do.
Let's look at the big structural and ideological preferences first. Under this proposal, if you prefer capitalism, you simply pack up and move to the capitalist sphere. If you prefer socialism, communism, anarchism, democracy, or even dictatorship, you relocate to the specific zone dedicated exclusively to that system. Think about it. There is no debate, no endless political campaigns trying to flip the system. You just live entirely with people who share your exact ideological baseline.
But it doesn't stop at high-level politics. This separation gets incredibly granular, right down to your daily habits. Do you prefer eating rice, or are you more of a noodles person? Are you strictly a meat eater, or are you deeply dedicated to a vegetarian diet? And what about marriage? Under this system, those who prefer strict monogamy form their own society. Those who prefer polygamy or polyandry form a totally different one. And if you advocate for a society entirely without marriage at all, you guessed it, you form your own separate community. Every single lifestyle clash is resolved through total physical separation.
Now, the text also pushes this thought experiment into some highly radical territory regarding demographics and geography. To theoretically eliminate discrimination entirely, Zhu Feng's proposal includes the physical geographic segregation of populations. For example, the text proposes gathering all white people in Europe, black people in Africa, and yellow people in Asia. Similarly, it suggests geographically isolating religious followers, so gathering all Christians in one designated place, Muslims in another, and Buddhists in a third. The author's underlying premise here is that absolute physical segregation mathematically removes the very opportunity for prejudice and intergroup friction to exist.
And this really hits the nail on the head for the author's core thesis. Forcing diverse preferences together virtually guarantees conflict. The text essentially argues that when individuals with wildly diverse preferences are forced into the exact same mode of living, arguments and physical fights are completely unavoidable. In Shui Feng's view, human arguments are just as meaningless and honestly as lacking in value as those farm animals endlessly bickering over trough space. The absolute value of separation, then, is that it finally allows everyone to find peace and happiness in their respective, homogeneous spheres without the constant friction of disagreement. Okay, let's pause here and take a collective breather. We have just mapped out an incredibly extreme, highly regulated vision of global segregation. Is any of this actually feasible? Well, here is where the essay introduces a massive, surprisingly self-aware twist. This entire utopian thought experiment completely recognizes its own impossibility.
Let me actually read you this exact quote directly from the end of Shu Feng's text. He writes, "Can the above ideals be realized? Certainly not, because those in power won't allow it. Therefore, this proposal is only meant to bring some amusement to everyone when they have enough to eat and drink and have nothing else to do." It completely reveals the whole piece as a philosophical daydream. The author is entirely self-aware that this extreme separation is pure fantasy. It serves mostly to entertain bored minds and, perhaps provoke some deep thought about just how absurd our daily conflicts really are.
So, if perfectly segregating ourselves to avoid all friction is just an impossible amusement, we really have to ask ourselves, are our differences truly the root of all our conflict, or are they actually the only thing keeping life interesting? That's a huge question. Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating text with me, and I'll leave you to ponder that one until next time.